Welcome to Study Time, a televised home learning program produced by Rwanda Education Board.
Hello, dear students. A very warm welcome to the TV learning programs. I'm Teacher Herbert, and today I will be with Form 2 class, or Senior 2 Biology class. And we are still on Unit 2, which is Introduction to Environmental Biology. And we're going to have Lesson 2, which is Energy Flow in an Ecosystem. So students, I hope you're going to enjoy the lesson. And we'll be showing you how energy should be flowing in an ecosystem. So students, welcome again. And I hope you have a pen, you are ready with a pen and a notebook, so that we can take the notes as well as you do the lesson assessment. So students, welcome. If you are ready, bravo. Let's start the lesson. So students, in the previous lesson, lesson 1, we discussed about some of the terms that are used in ecology. We talked about a population, we talked about ecosystem, we talked about a community, we talked about biotic and abiotic factors. So students, before I start my lesson, I would like to ask you, who can give me examples of abiotic factors and examples of biotic factors? What are biotic factors? When you talk about biotic factors, student, we mean non-living things. When you talk about biotic factors, we talk about living things. Examples of abiotic factors, we talked about sun, we talked about water, we talked about soil, we talked about pH, we talked about water, we talked about wind. All these are abiotic factors, without forgetting even humidity. Then when we talk about biotic factors, living things, examples of living things, we talk about human beings, plants, animals. They are all biotic factors, all right? So now, if you still remember what we discussed in the previous lesson, thank you so much for keeping the information, all right? So let's start the lesson. The lesson has two main learning objectives. One is to explain and describe the energy flow in an ecosystem. You still remember the ecosystem? A unit which is composed of both biotic and abiotic factors. We're also going to explain and describe how energy is flow in an ecosystem, all right? So let's start the lesson. When you start the lesson, we have to go through the introduction. Now, I have some diagrams. What do you see in the diagram? Okay? You can see the diagram. We have some of the diagram that shows this is sunlight. These are plants, human being. There is something like keep saturating. Cycle like a cycle, showing a saturation of something, all right? As you see in this diagram, this is energy flow in an ecosystem. How is energy going to be flowed in an ecosystem? All right? Let's have this, okay? What do you see in the diagram? See the diagram? We have plants. They do respire. And once they respire, the plants could take in oxygen, could take in carbon dioxide by combustion process. This is an industry or a house. Animals, those who do respire, there is carbon dioxide. So after respiration, because the plant also consume the carbon dioxide and use it for photosynthesis. These are plant roots. They also absorb process of respiration. We have mineral carbon, we have decayed organisms and etc. All these are showing how energy is going to be flowed in these organisms. How could animals feed in green plants? How could plants get energy from sunlight? And eventually, they convert chemical energy into, light energy, into a chemical energy, all right? So let's have the lesson, all right? We said the primary source of energy is the sun. Is that true, student? I think it's true. Because energy enters enters ecosystem in the form of sunlight. Part of it is then converted into a chemical energy by green plants. So that energy from plants, they get energy from sunlight, okay, and enters into an ecosystem. And part of it is converted into a chemical energy by green plants, okay? So these are producers through the process of photosynthesis. If you still remember, when we talk about photosynthesis, the process by which green plants make their own food in presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. If you still remember, I can give you the equation of photosynthesis. Let's have the equation of photosynthesis. Equation of photosynthesis. Okay? What are the raw materials that are necessary for plants to make its own food? We have, let me just first start with the word equation. Word equation. Word equation. Okay? What do you have? The word equation. You must be having carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide. Okay? Plus water. Okay? Now, in the presence of sunlight, as I told you, as a source of light, sunlight energy, and chlorophyll, okay, to get glucose plus oxygen, which is given out as a byproduct. Okay? That is the word equation. All right? From there, we can get the chemical equation then from there. Chemical equation. That is, we get carbon dioxide, okay, plus water. Then in the presence of all these things I'm talking about, sunlight, okay, and chlorophyll, okay, you get CH6, hydrogen 12, oxygen 6, plus oxygen, which is given out as a byproduct. You balance the equation. Remember to balance the equation because you have to check the number of atoms that if they are equal. So that is the equation for photosynthesis. How does this happen? Because the plant are making its own food by the process of photosynthesis, okay? So plants are always referred to as the producers, okay? So the process of photosynthesis, as I've shown you, so for this reason, the plants are referred to as autotrophs because they are ready to make their own food. Are you with me, student? So plant passes this energy to grazers who feeds on plants for food. You may have an example. They transfer the energy, sunlight energy, into a chemical energy, and which is going to be helped by these grazers or herbivores to make its own food. So these organisms that feeds on plants and cannot manufacture their own food, they are therefore known as heterotrophs. Two processes, we have autotrophs. Auto means itself. Okay? They are able, what you call self-production. They are able to make its own food. All right? Then heterotrophs means different. They don't make their own food. They cannot manufacture their own food. They feed on ready-made food. Okay? So those organisms that feed on plants directly are known as herbivores. Organisms that depend on plants, they are referred to as herbivores. So herbivores fix part of the energy into their bodies. The rest is lost into the surrounding because the rest of the energy is normally go to rest into the surrounding. All right? They are also, in turn, eaten by the carnivores. Get the point? Who taken in part of the energy, lost in large part in form of the heat, and even in waste excrete, because they can also lose the energy in form of heat and even in waste excrete or in waste form. All right? So, carnivores are grouped into the first level, second level, up to the what you call topmost levels. The topmost carnivores receives the least portion of the energy as most of it has been lost. Okay? So the last trophic level in an ecosystem is that of what you call decomposers. Okay? So they decompose inorganic matter, thus allowing the recycling of nutrients, because if they decay, they allow the recycling of nutrients. You remember the word that I mentioned in all terms, that no man is an island, because once the plant is eaten by the herbivores is going to be eaten by the carnivores. The carnivores is going to be eaten by decomposers, okay? And eventually they will decompose, okay? The decomposers, examples are saprophytes, fungi and mushrooms or saprophytic organisms. They act on dead remaining of organisms in all other levels. Let me just try to make what you call a simple understanding of it, okay? We have producers, good? We have producers. Producers is being eaten. The arrow means, in biology, the word the arrow means eaten by. It's going to be eaten by herbivores, okay? The herbivores is going to be eaten by what? By the carnivores, okay? The carnivores is going to be eaten by what? The students. Think about it and you tell me. Carnivores is going to be eaten by the decomposers. Examples are saprophytes, decomposers. Excellent. Decomposers. So, as you see from here, that one shows what you call energy flow, how energy is transferred from one organism to another organism. And when you reach here at the carnivores, the energy is going to get lost slowly by slowly. All right. Okay? Let's have, it should be noted that sometimes in an ecosystem, organisms can feed on both plants and animals. Okay? What do you call those examples of organisms that can feed on both plants and animals? Think about it and you tell me. They are called omnivores. Where we are belonging, human beings are belonging to omnivores because we are able to eat the plants as well as we can eat the animals. We eat the vegetables. We eat the fruits. We eat the goats. We eat the cows. We become the omnivores. That is very clear in Jab Jombi. Examples of such organisms are pigs. Pigs is omnivores, and even human beings. So in ecology, the trophical levels refers to a position an organism occupies in a food chain. This is what we call a trophical level. If you try to, this is a trophical level. Trophical level refers to a position an organism occupies in a food chain. This is a food chain, the transfer, a sequence of energy transfer. All right? So, green plants form the first trophical level. Here, the green plant is making the first trophical level. Okay? Now, the second trophical level is occupied by the herbivores. The third trophical level is occupied by the carnivores. And the fourth trophical level is occupied by the decomposers. Excellent, if you are following me very well. Good. And enjoy the lesson. So, the producers occupy the first trophical level. So some organisms such as herbivores feed directly on plants to obtain energy. Take an example. Cows cannot get energy when they don't feed on grasses or on plants. All right? But plants, where do the plants get energy? From sunlight. Let's talk about other organisms that obtains this energy in indirect form by feeding on herbivores. They don't depend on plants directly. They do depend on plants indirectly. Take an example, like lions. They don't depend on plants. But the herbivores, take an example, like gazelles, zebras, buffaloes, they feed on plants. They are herbivores. After feeding on them, the lion comes and kills the lion because it's a predator. It hunts and kills the buffalo, then after it gets energy. So collectively, these organisms are called consumers. We have, these ones are called primary consumer, secondary consumer, and even tertiary consumers. Trophical levels, okay? So herbivores like grasshoppers form the secondary trophical level. The first carnivores like lizards form the third trophical level, followed by the snake, and the fourth level, and then the eagles come to the fifth level as a top level of carnivores. So some consumers are called detrivores. What does it mean for detrivores? They derive their energy from non-living organic matter, such as feces and even foreign leaves. They can get their energy in that form. All right? Let's have organisms in different trophical levels. Let me start with the producers. If you go through the diagram, we have producers which occupies the first trophical level. Then a composition of organisms, we have green plants, we have photosynthetic bacteria, we have the algae, we have photoplanktons, and all autotrophics. Have consumers, under consumers, we have secondary consumers, we have primary consumers, okay? These are plants-eating organisms. These are organs that eat the plants. They depend on plants' materials. They include filter feeders in water, herbivores, and all foods and plant materials. We have third trophical level, which includes secondary consumers. We have small carnivores, like insectivores, insects, spider, tadpoles, hydra, small fish, lizards, frogs, toads, chameleon, all these occupy the secondary consumers. We have the fourth trophical level, which could be occupied by large carnivores, such as lions, leopards, cheetah, hyena, sharks, among others, all right, which is very clear. We have the fifth trophical level, or curtain consumer, which is carnivores that eats tertiary consumers. An example, we have the hawk, and even the hawk that eats the owls. We have decomposers, all saprophytic, most of the fungi and bacteria, they can only get food from dead, decayed matters. So that is how we could talk about organisms in different trophical levels. If you are together with me, that's okay. Let's talk about food chain, okay? What is a food chain? A food chain is a linear representation of how organisms eat each other before they are eaten in return. You can eat one organism before being eaten. Let me just have a small example. I can have the grass, which is the green plants. The green plants is being eaten by the grasshopper, okay, grasshopper. The grasshopper is being eaten by the lizards, okay. The lizards are being eaten by the snake, okay. The snake is being eaten by the hawk. Excellent. That is a good example of what you call trophical level. Energy flow. Grass are producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, and top carnivore. Excellent. That's what we are talking about, how energy should just be transferred from one organ to another organism, okay? So it is a sequence that describes the feeding relationship between producers and consumers. When the feeding relationship is put down schematically, what is formed is known as what you call a food chain. That is what you call a food chain. Feeding sequence or energy transfer from one organism to another organism. So energy in an ecosystem can be passed on from the sun through several organisms. So insects like grasshoppers feed on grass. The grass is a producer because it can make its own food. We talk about producers, the plants. They are referred to be the initial organism in any food chain. Initial organism in any food chain is referred to as producers. Let me talk about grasshoppers are primary consumers because they obtain chemical energy directly from the plant. All right? The insects are eaten by the birds, which obtain chemical energy from them. The birds are secondary consumer. If birds is eaten by the wild dogs, then the wild dogs is also quaternary consumers. Let's have the diagram of food chain. Grass being eaten by the grasshopper. Grasshopper is being eaten by the birds. Birds are being eaten by mongoose, and mongoose is being eaten by the dog. This is referred as a food chain. We go through another diagram. If any of these organisms dies, what happens? If one of these is died, let me have an example. If the grasshopper is died because of a disease, what happens? Automatically, the green plants will increase. And once they increase, automatically competition will be raised from there. And eventually, these lizards will also not increase because they are going to be lacking food. And which will lead to them, they will lead them to die. And also, the snake will also decrease in number. And we will find the whole ecosystem will be affected. Student, very good. So it means that as a saprophytic like fungi and bacteria, decomposers is to obtain food nutrients. So the saprophytes are described as decomposers. They obtain a chemical energy from food chain. So some of the energy is released into the ecosystem in that way. Okay? Let's have the diagram. This is the examples of food chain. We have a very number of food chain which is here. You can go through and you understand them very clearly. Let me talk about a food web, a complex feeding relationship. Or a food web is made up of very many food chains. It is rare in an ecosystem to find that organisms eat only one type of food. They always have other options in case one is not in place to be consumed, which is very clear. So a food web is therefore a complex series of interconnecting food chains, or it is a complex feeding relationship that is made up of very many food chains. It shows a feeding relationship between various species of organisms in a given community. So a food web is composed of all possible food chains in any given ecosystem. When a schematic representation, we talk about diagrammatic representation, is made to show other options an organism has for food and food web, all right? Let's talk about these examples of food web. Let me just go through. I can construct very many food chains from here. Grasshopper is, the grass is being eaten by the locust. Locust is eaten by praying mantis. Praying mantis is being eaten by the lizard. This is another one which is grasshopper, aphids, and even praying mantis. And praying mantis is eaten by the lizard. The aphids is eaten by the spider, spider by the lizard, and so on and forth. This is a complex feeding relationship, which is called a food web. It is like a web. Talk about a web composed of very many food chains. When you just go here, we have a grass, we have a caterpillar, we have the frog. Caterpillar can be eaten by the lizards, as well as the caterpillar can be eaten by the frog. Okay? So it means that once it misses if the frog misses the caterpillar, caterpillar, because if the frog misses a caterpillar, it can also be eaten by the lizard. Something like that. Let me talk about, in food web, identifies as many food chains as possible. There are very many food chains as possible, which is very clear. The higher organisms, such as the snake and owls, depends on more than one particular food. It can depend more than particular food, not one food. Okay? Also, note that decomposers such as bacteria and fungi are involved in all parts of food web. All right? So, food web comprises the relationship within a community. It is easier to made by arranging organisms in their trophical levels. So, the arrows in food chain indicates the flow. These arrows shows the flow of energy, okay, from the food web. One organism can provide energy to more than one trophical level. Take an example. Have this. This is a producer, 10 kg. This is a primary consumer, 550 kg. We have secondary consumer being provided with 100 kg juice. We have the third consumer, which has almost like 10 kg. And we also have the decomposers also gets the energy from there. So, but starts from where? From the sunlight. So how energy flows in an ecosystem is like that. Which is also, all these, carry what you call a respiration. Respiration and excretion and even movement. So energy can get lost through respiration. Energy can get lost through excretion and even movement. So when it comes to the top consumers, you find there is more energy being lost compared to the producers. Producers, they lose less energy because less respiration, less excretion, as well as less movement. So less energy is being lost in that way. So let me talk about, from the diagram above, we can see that energy from the sun flows through producers to consumers, which is very clear. The energy is flowing from producers to consumers. It also shows that not all energy from the producers is transferred to the consumers. Energy cannot be totally transferred to the consumers. So energy flow into the food chain from the sun to plants through the process of photosynthesis, and it then moves up the food chain into higher trophical levels, since the transfer of energy from the one trophical level to the next is insufficient. So less energy enters into the highest trophical energy levels. So let me have the last one, several factors that account for the loss of energy as one moves from one trophical level to the year to the next. This includes the following. What makes it the loss of energy in that way? Respiration, as I mentioned it, part of the energy is also lost as an undigested food material. Are you getting me very well? The last one, the rest is also lost as excretory products. So students, I'm coming to the end of the lesson, but before I come to the end of the lesson, I have to test your understanding to see if you have really understood what I'm telling you, what we've discussed. We have discussed about the food web, we have discussed about the food chain, we have discussed about how energy is transferred from one organism to another organism, and so on and so forth. So let me just give you a lesson assessment. Lesson assessment. Consider this food chain. Grasshopper birds. The birds in this food chain are producers, B, primary consumers, C, secondary consumers, D, tertiary consumers. B, if a disease kills all the birds, what effect will it have in this food chain? Number 2, vultures feed on dead bodies of animals. The vultures is the best described as an omnivorous, carnivorous, decomposers, scavenger. An ecosystem carried out a survey to estimate the number of organisms in a certain dam. The following table shows the record of the survey. You go through the record of survey. There is what you call microscopic algae, small fish, mosquito larvae, crocodiles, and large fish. So you just go through that survey, and you're able to answer the following question that are being asked on that survey. So students, thank you very much for your active participation and listening, and for watching. Enjoy the rest of the day. See you next time. Bye.